What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Rams Brothers. I'm your host, Dean, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother and the other great host of this show, Nick. And Nick, the Ernest Jones trade happened today. The Rams cut their roster down from 90 to 53. But first and most importantly, before we jump into anything, how are you?
I'm good. I going to be completely frank with everybody right now. I am not loving the state of the team currently in its 53-man form, but in McVay and Steve we trust, and we will continue, and we will be, we'll find some things to be happy about by the end of this episode, I'm sure.
I believe that to be true. Before we jump into the episode, just want to mention everybody, this episode is brought to you by our partner, Autograph. Autograph is where real fans get unreal rewards. All you got to do is consume Rams content. Download the app, scan the QR code that's right here, punch in the referral code, consume Rams content. You listen to a podcast, you get 30 coins. You read an article, you get 5 coins. You're getting rewarded for being a Rams fan. And then you could apply all those rewards to tickets, to merchandise, whatever it may be. So we love our partner in Autograph. Wanted to make sure that we mentioned that before jumping into the episode. I want to remind everybody to ram it, like and subscribe. Join the movement. We are here for you guys. Live reactions to the Ernest Jones trade, live reactions to the 53-man roster as it's being finalized. So, Nick, as we jump into this episode, let's talk about Ernest Jones, because I was by myself for the last episode talking about Ernest Jones. I missed you dearly. I'm sure Rams fans were going nuts having to listen to me the entire episode, but you're back. So I want to get your reaction on the Ernest Jones trade. It seems like it's a very emotional moment for Rams fans in terms of getting rid of your captain, getting rid of the all-time tackle leader in terms of the record being broken last year. Obviously, a $3 million cap savings, dead cap hit of $210K, but like none of that stuff really matters when you lose the leader of your defense.
Yeah, if the Rams are one thing, it's loud, and with that comes being a little messy. The Cam Akers news was horrible. The Todd Gurley situation was really bad. The Ramsey situation was not handled well. And now this, you could just add this on top of that, because he's out here tweeting Ernest Jones before this happens, like, hey, I never requested a trade. Like, I did not do that. But the Rams were clearly shopping him around. So they saw something in him. I assume it's this knee injury to be worse than what they previously thought it was. And they like to sell high on their, on their assets. And that's what they're trying to do right now. So they get rid of him, but it's just a shame because after Aaron Donald is gone, he was kind of our ipso facto leader of the defense, and now I don't really know who they're going to be leaning on.
And that's the scary part. I just listened to an interview from DeMarco Farr, obviously Super Bowl champion, voice of LA radio from 1999, Super Bowl champion. He was the Aaron Donald before Aaron Donald. He's been on the show a long, long time ago. But he was like, who's the leader of this defense? Is it Jared Verse? Is it Braden Fisk? Is it Cam Curl? Is it Quentin Lake? Like, it might be Jared Verse. And, that's fine if a rookie is going to overperform expectations. He's going to overexceed expectations in terms of his play on the field and being a vocal leader. And it seems like he could be that guy. But here's what we're dealing with in terms of the actual details of the trade. It's like Rams fans, this is another reason why everybody's pissed off, because the Titans received Ernest Jones in a 2026 sixth rounder, and the Rams received the 2026 fifth rounder. So you got your Super Bowl champion, the leader of your defense, the green dot wearer in Ernest Jones, now in Tennessee. It was one of the 4 teams that I mentioned in the last episode that could be potentially interested in acquiring him. But, like, how could you be okay with this in terms of a pick swap unless you know that knee injury is really, really bad?
Yeah, and then it's like, what do the Vikings, or sorry, the Vikings, what do the Titans really think that they're getting out of him if all they're asking for is just a pick swap? I mean, it feels like a better deal had to have been somewhere, and it's not even like they're sending him to a contender and they're like helping him out and it's like friendly to him. Like, the Titans are going nowhere this year.
It seems like that's where players go to die almost.
Right, right now it's a lose-lose situation for both parties. And yeah, it's especially like while they're doing all these like other cuts right now with the roster, like it's kind of like piling up on like just a really strange day of cuts and trades. I don't know. It's not something you want to see headed into the season, to be honest with you.
You know what? It leaves a lot of room for emotion. And, that's what you're getting, especially on X. You're getting a ton of emotion so far from Rams fans. Like, this is why would you get rid of a player like this? It doesn't necessarily make sense. Like, and I mentioned, I want to correct myself, not the all-time tackles leader, the single-season tackles leader, Ernest Jones. He broke James Laurinaitis' record, 10, 15 years ago or so. And it's just ridiculous because McVay came on yesterday, and it seems like he was showing his hand. Like everything was done at that point when he had that interview yesterday, and it went live yesterday around this time when he said, we're just working through a couple of different things. We're just going to take it a day at a time. That is coach speak. That is him, showing his hand and is saying that, okay, he hasn't been in camp, wasn't due to the knee injury. He was in camp for part of the time, but we were working out the contract details. And then the knee injury came out, and they were like, okay, it went back to last year. And Snead was talking about how in the offseason, they told him in March that they weren't going to renegotiate his contract for this season. And then the knee injury, it was like 11 days ago that they were talking about how the knee injury had healed itself, but it was something that was lingering from last year. It's like there's so many balls that you're juggling in the air at this point. And I think that's what makes Rams fans uncomfortable. We're like, you have to be able to be a little bit more transparent with the fan base if you're going to be able to move on from a leader of the defense, especially at the time when you lose Aaron Donald.
They've never, ever, ever been good at that.
I know, yeah.
Ever. I mean, like the Ramsey situation is probably the worst one that I can remember. I mean, talk about leader of the defense, he's out here like putting these like cryptic tweets. Like everybody was probably inside the building, very aware that this was going to happen like soon, like recently. And I think Ernest thinking that this is where he was going to be located for the season, regardless of whatever happened to his knee, because they just there's something that they have with each other, help win the Super Bowl. It just feels like they throw him away, and that's kind of what they do. It's very similar to what we saw with the Patriots, where like they're like a run. I mean, they were trying to get rid of Tom Brady before he officially left. At least Bill Belichick. Right. It was like, as soon as you are no longer at your peak performance, we are moving on from you. But you hope that I said it before. The return package of what we got back from the Titans is just so upsetting.
Yeah, it is. And then you got to look forward to like who's going to wear the green dot. Is it going to be Jake Hummel? Is it going to be Omar Speights? The Rams actually kept 5 undrafted rookies on the 53-man roster, all of them on defense. Omar Speights, Elias Neal, Josh Wallace, Charles Woods, and Jaylen McCollough. So they obviously love these young kids. Cam Curl's another option in terms of who could potentially wear the green dot. Quentin Lake, obviously, I think is an option, considering he's worn it before. They used to let Jalen Ramsey wear the green dot. It's a very fluid situation. They're going to be working out some of these things over the next couple of weeks in anticipation of the Lions. But today was a day where you had to trim down from 90 to 53 players, and they did it 45 minutes after the fact, which was a little bit frustrating. But each team also has 17 players that they can allocate to the practice squad, including a spot allocated for the International Player Pathway Program. So I want to get to who has been waived. So I'm just going to read off this list. Waived, no recall. Offensive lineman A.J. Acuri, offensive lineman Justin Dedich, running back Zach Evans. You surprised by Zach Evans? Because they also got rid of Boston Scott, Nick.
Yeah, the Boston Scott one hurts more, and Zach Evans, because both of them you're thinking are going to be returning kicks at some point. And now you look at all these cuts and you're like, are we really about to throw out Tutu Atwell again in this situation? It's not something you want to see. It's because you picked up Boston Scott or Zach Evans for that like exact reasoning. And now you're going to be throwing out Tutu Atwell, who is potentially going to be traded before the end of this podcast.
Yeah, I know. That's definitely in play, I would think. And it could be another pick swap for what anybody knows, similar to Van Jefferson or Cam Akers or now Ernest Jones in terms of the latest pick swap victim. And also Xavier Smith was waived. So Xavier Smith was another one. And we'll talk about special teams in a second. You got a lot of things going on in terms of special teams. Who's going to return kicks? Who's going to return punts? I guess they're putting all their eggs in Tutu Atwell's basket. but also defensive back Tanner Engel, defensive back Sean Jolly, tight end Nikola Kalanchik, defensive back Cam Lampkin, defensive lineman Tuli Letulu. I'm not going to pronounce the rest of that name. Offensive line Mike McCollough, defensive lineman David Olajigba. I mentioned Xavier Smith, Drake Stoops, defensive back Jason Taylor, offensive or outside linebacker Keir Thomas, offensive lineman Zachary Thomas, outside linebacker Zachary Van Valkenburg. A little bit of a surprise there. I thought he had a really good preseason. Wide receiver Sam Wiglas, and then also waived who were injured. So this guy's considered to be injured and also waived is defensive end Anthony Goodlow. Reserved, physically unable to perform. We know Tyler Higbee is on the PUP list. Reserved for an injury designation to return. Offensive lineman KT Leviston, the 7th-round pick as of this year. Defensive lineman Laurel Murchison, who they like a lot. And then reserved, injured, without a designated to return is Trey Tomlinson. I thought that was pretty interesting in terms of like Trey Tomlinson had a really, really tough preseason. Yeah. There's no timeline in terms of when he's going to return. Nobody even knew that he had an injury. So I think for the most part, plenty of surprises so far.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at that list, there are a lot of people that kind of stand out, and you're like, I really thought that these people were going to be able to stay, and now it's like the offensive line. We are immediately looking at that. Help me out. The guy that we picked up from the Patriots.
Oh, Connor McDermott.
Yeah. So I mean, like every other team has put out like the official 53-man roster as of 1:57 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That list is all we have for who was like waived and cut. I just don't really understand. Like, there's a lot of frustration right now as a Rams fan as you're sitting here and like going through and like watching all these moves happen and you don't have your 53-man roster yet. It's very frustrating. I think it's a really important.
And that's considered to be the second wave of cuts. So in the first wave of cuts, we got Dresser Wynn. So just a dresser for the preseason games, I'd imagine, because he started one preseason game just because Rams fans, had to watch Stetson Bennett for 2 whole preseason games. Now Stetson Bennett's going to be QB2 for the first 2 weeks of the season. And Jimmy Garoppolo is obviously suspended, as we've talked about. Boston Scott, we already talked about. Matt Caskey, he was that UFL signing that we originally brought in. He's waived. J.J. Lopp caught the game-winning touchdown in the second game of the preseason from Stetson Bennett. He's waived. Tackle Blake Larson, center Alex Lindstrom, center Mike McCallister, guard Grant Miller, running back Sir Roderick Thompson. We already talked about Keir Thomas. Defense tackle Carlos Watkins, which was another guy we literally just brought in. Sir Roderick Thompson and Carlos Watkins came in literally for a cup of coffee and left. Olaf Patowski, linebacker. He was backing up Omar Speights in the preseason. And then Oshawott Mathis, I thought was a pretty legitimate surprise considering he was a former 6th-round pick from 2023, spent 5 weeks of the 2023 season on IR. But somebody had commented, looks like Tarzan plays like Jane. So that is kind of the story so far of Oshawott Mathis. He's probably going to be brought back on the practice squad. But like now you got to try and figure out, and also Cam McCutcheon, now you got to try and figure out who is going to be a part of this practice squad. You need a quarterback, you need a running back, you need a couple of wide receivers, you need a tackle. And a lot of these guys that we had mentioned are likely going to fall back on the practice squad. But a lot of the guys in the first wave of the cuts are probably either the Rams want to give them another opportunity to find a different team, or you're going to have to keep a guy like Dresser Wynn, potentially J.J. Lopp on your practice squad if they go unclaimed. So,
I mean, I would love to keep Boston Scott around, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, he is the leading rusher in the preseason, so I don't know if he's going to go elsewhere.
Right. Somebody else will probably pick him up. I mean, honestly, maybe even the Eagles might.
Yeah.
Just like a locker room kind of like. But the idea of Tutu Atwell returning kicks is making me so angry. Flash the picture of him looking like 150 pounds. It's not who you want to be to feel confident. Somebody that's going to be touching the ball all the time. That the team itself doesn't really even feel confident for him to even be on the team. So I'm trying not to lose my cool, but we are getting very close to the season, and we are not excited right now as of this moment.
Well, you got a couple of question marks because Tutu Atwell is going to be returning kicks and punts most likely because Boston Scott and also Xavier Smith is no longer an option. Xavier Smith was a guy I had a ton of confidence in. I thought he could return kicks and punts, and I would be entirely confident in him also backing up DeMarcus Robinson. You got your left tackle. He's going to be suspended for the first 2 games of the season because he violated the personal conduct policy, and there's no actual detail on what the hell he did. The right tackle and Rob Havenstein was stepped on in practice 3 weeks ago. And then Sean McVay was talking about how he could potentially end up on the IR, but he's probably not going to. So now you're going to have to probably roll out Joe Noteboom at left tackle. You're probably going to have to roll out Warren McClendon. The starting left tackle for the Rams all throughout preseason, A.J. Acuri, was waived. So, so like, of course, the Lions, could get a situation where the Rams are a little bit depleted. Obviously, you lost Ernest Jones as well. But, you got 2 weeks to be able to prep for this. They're going to have to do things like probably roll out another tight end. I saw a stat where they were in 3 receiver sets and 11 personnel for 99% of plays this preseason. So, if the Lions are doing anything in terms of scouting that, probably a bad idea because the Rams are going to be rolling out 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, extra blocking. Blake Corum and Kyron Williams are going to have to be in pass pro, having to protect Matthew Stafford more frequently. So, a lot of these things are going to have to change over the next couple of weeks. And the Rams now have to do even more in order to get ready for Sunday Night Football against the Detroit Lions, which I think is a reason why a lot of people are stressed. And then if we transition over to special teams, the kicker missed an extra point in the latest preseason game. He didn't hit a 50-yarder. We were hopeful of that. We were talking about Ethan Evans in terms of his punt average being down almost 10 yards. I think they were working on some directional stuff, some analytical stuff in terms of it's the preseason. Let's try out some coverage things for the special teams and for the punter. But there's 6 question marks just right there.
Yeah.
And that's with excluding things like Jonah Jackson's injury, Puka Nakua's injury, Matthew Stafford's hamstring. I get where the concern comes from.
When you're bottom of the barrel, a hard 32nd out of 32nd on special teams the year prior. And then you go into the year and you kind of address some of the problems, we're just going to get a new kicker and a new punter. And our kicker is one of the only kickers to miss an extra point in the preseason, which is one of the main things that we were so that's why we had the kicker carousel last year.
Is that true? He's the only one to miss a kick.
No, I think he's one of the only ones.
Okay.
It's a short list. And the punter, didn't impress me at all. I don't know if they're trying to do something special, but zero faith in him going forward. And then Tutu Atwell is the answer as the returner, which I hate. So to me, not addressing any of that and then going into Sunday or next Sunday with none of that addressed from last year is the biggest concern. And I know special team, it's, they don't prioritize it at all, but you lose and win games on special teams so frequently.
Yeah.
More of a concern than it's right.
You also lose games if your defense isn't prepared. And you got a first-year defensive coordinator. You're going to be heavily, heavily reliant on your defensive front because all of your linebackers are undrafted players, right? Are they not? Jake Hummel, Omar Speights, Troy Reeder. What else you really got in terms of what you're rolling out in the second level of the defense? You got a lot of undrafted guys. Omar Speights looks like he's going to be good, but then you're so reliant on your front and your secondary. You got guys like Trey White coming off of an injury. Cam Curl's going to be debuting in his first game in week 1. Quentin Lake has a really, really hefty responsibility in terms of playing the star. You got Kobe Durant, who needs to step up this year. You're just relying on a lot of different things to go right at this point. And it's not like this wasn't how it was last year. I don't want to act like the sky is entirely falling because you were so heavily reliant on the rookies being able to show out. But at least you were able to hang your hat on things like Puka Nacua and Aaron Donald and Matthew Stafford being somewhat healthy for a good chunk of the season outside of a little bit of a stretch going into the bye week. But I think there's a few question marks I think are going to be concerning Rams fans over the next couple of weeks that I'm sure we'll talk about leading up to that Lions game.
I hope they're having a discussion with Shula. hey, there is a high percent chance that you are going to be getting a lot of the blame for the potentially negative start to the season because you're subtracting Ernest Jones, like you said, all these undrafted guys, and the Lions were one of the top offensive units in the league last year.
Yep.
That was where they succeeded. That's why they got to the NFC Championship. It was not their defense. Their defense was helpful, but their offense was the reason why they were there. And now you're going up against them. First week of the season, Stafford returning to Detroit, which always has like big, theatrics behind it. And there's a real chance now. I think that they go into that game. I loved Rams +3, but now it feels like it would lean the other way, and that is just disappointing to start the season because then I think you go right to the first home game against San Francisco.
No, I think they're week 3. Arizona's week 2.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah, it does. Right. If you could steal a win from Detroit and then you go get a win against Arizona and then, San Francisco is a whole different battle. But then you got your left tackle back. Hopefully Rob Havenstein will be healthy. You'll be able to sort some things out in the second level of the defense. Hopefully teams will be better. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think it's a tough time, right? Because it felt like even though all throughout the offseason, we're in a good spot. We've made some really good signings. We brought in Colby Parkinson. We brought in Jonah Jackson. We brought in Cam Curl. Obviously, Aaron Donald's retiring, but the front is young. The front is healthy. The front is going to be fun. We still have Ernest Jones in the middle playing on the last year of his deal. The Rams could potentially extend him. And, some of those things are now out the door. I guess one thing to hang your hat on is Andrew Whitworth making that face yesterday when he was talking to Kay Adams about Aaron Donald's potential return. When she was like, I feel like that he's coming back. And he was like, maybe. No. But, I mean, you just can't depend on those kind of things. And you would want Aaron Donald to come back into a situation where the team is in a spot where it looks like they could make a pretty deep postseason run. So
last year, the run came more of that in a clutch sort of way. They started off the season really slow, and then they were treating all the back half games like playoff games. It's not at all how I imagine this year to go, but now I'm kind of putting my head in that potential outcome where you start the season 1-2, and then all of a sudden you're you're climbing back, and there's a chance San Francisco,
which they did last year. They did it just fine last year. They were 3-6 going into the bye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, geez. After that Cowboys game where it looked like they were dead in the water.
Yeah, the Cowboys game and the Brett Rippon game against the Packers.
Yeah. God.
Yeah, it's tough. But this team, I got to give a lot of credit to Les Snead. You got to give credit to Sean McVay. They make decisions fast. They pull the trigger fast, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. You look at the Brandon Ayuk situation, you look at the Trent Williams situation, you look at all these other ongoing things, the drama with Jerry Jones and CeeDee Lamb. They let players go. Ernest Jones wanted to start a family in Los Angeles. It didn't happen. He was, there was a request to seek a trade. There was permission granted. He sought a trade. Now he's in Tennessee. Not a bad place to raise a family. It's just all of these things happen so quickly. It's just, that's why it gets a little bit scary, because this is somebody that I think a lot of Rams fans were just comfortable with in the middle, considering. And you know what? Also, I'm thinking to myself, you brought in Bobby Wagner, and there was so much conversation about Bobby Wagner growing Ernest Jones into the next great inside linebacker. And then Bobby Wagner leaves after a year. Ernest Jones is supposed to be the leader of the defense, and then it all goes out the window.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the Bobby Wagner thing, it was just bad. It just did not work. It was not a good fit. But I know that I spent the majority of this episode complaining about what the Rams have done. My thought of McVay and Snead has never once dwindled at all. I have faith in them. It's just frustrating when you're a fan and all of this stuff seems to just be piling on top of each other, and you're like, okay, so how can I not have a negative energy going into week 1 right now? But we have a whole week until that even happens. So there are things that can transpire between that time. And then, week 1 happens and they can shut us all up, which is
right. Exactly. And kind of what happened last year until the next 5-6 games of the season happened. They beat Seattle, 30-17, and everything had changed at that point. And I was also looking at other Rams, former Rams that have gotten cut. Allen Robinson, Treyman Akram, Brett Rippon, we just talked about, John Wolford, and Ben Skoranek all have been released as well.
Cut, huh? He got
Wolford got cut.
Tampa?
Wolford got cut from Tampa. Yep. So I don't know. Maybe Nick, do you see him back with the Rams at some point?
I would take him over Stetson Bennett.
I can't say that I disagree with you.
Yeah,
I really can't.
I mean, the Rams fans of Rams Brothers the Pod, like true fans, know that I have almost zero love in my body for John Wolford. So that is saying quite a bit.
Yeah. I can't say that I blame you. At least you're not talking about bringing Brett Rippon back. You remember Allen Robinson back in the day when Allen Robinson signed that $46.5 million contract? And it was the Eagles who were supposed to give Allen Robinson that exact contract. And they ended up calling the Titans for a trade for A.J. Brown. I was just hypothetically thinking to myself, what would have happened if the Rams had A.J. Brown instead of Allen Robinson for this time period with Matthew Stafford under center? It just would have been a lot of fun. But now Allen Robinson's not even in the league. It's just such a difference. A.J. Brown goes, 12th pick overall in your fantasy draft.
Yeah, I doubt the Eagles even make it to the Super Bowl that year if they had Allen Robinson over A.J. Brown.
Oh, 100%. You're 100% spot on. Yeah, that's
so he is so important to what the DNA of that Eagles team is. And Allen Robinson was such a dud. That was those were little rose-colored glasses though. I think it was right after the Super Bowl win, right?
It was. I think it was March. So February, and then Super Bowl, then March. Sign Allen Robinson, sign Bobby Wagner.
And I was like, there is no harm in the world that could ever be done that will make me lose this love. And it's just so funny how we were terrible almost instantly following the Super Bowl win.
So many injuries. Yeah, it was tough. But as we're working through the next couple of weeks, we will be here for you guys. We'll be talking to you again, obviously, a couple of times before the Lions. But yeah, we're going to talk through all things Ernest Jones in the next couple of weeks. Any more detail that we find out potentially about his knee, talking about the starting offensive line, talking about the defense, Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, and everything in between. We appreciate you guys listening, as always. I also want you guys to keep your eyes on any players that have gotten cut, right? Caleb Farley is one, a defensive back from the Titans, former first-round pick that was cut that I want you guys to keep your eyes on. A lot of linebackers were cut. So, the Rams could bring in another player. You also could look at, who was it? Was it Shaq Barrett? Who was the linebacker? Shaq Leonard was the linebacker that we were looking at that they could potentially bring in. So, keep your eyes on those kind of things. Those kind of things could transpire in the next couple of weeks leading up to the Lions. But want to make sure to remind everybody, like and subscribe. Be a part of this. We're having a lot of fun, and we love you guys.
Subscribe. Download Autograph, use our promo code. If you download Autograph, the promo code is B1B3F930. Check that out for us. Autograph is awesome. We appreciate them. And not this next episode, but the one after that, we're going to have our first Knicks picks of 2024 season.
I love it. Can't wait. We're going to have a lot of fun. Yeah, we appreciate you guys. We will talk to you soon. Go Rams.
Go Rams, everyone.